We're going to go to 1996.
Hello!
There we go, a little bit of Super Mario from the Nintendo 64 gaming console, which went on sale in Japan 25 years ago on this day. Faith Johnson is a gaming journalist and retro collector. She has a website called Retro Faith you can speak to now. Good morning, Faith.
Good morning. How are you doing, Stig?
Not too bad at all. Now, my console days ended with an 8-bit, the original NES, the NES, which but this is the sort of third generation of that, isn't it? Was this a big moment in gaming when the Nintendo 64 came out?
It was, and for many reasons as well. It was actually the first time that Nintendo had kind of gone into a 3D world, but by that time, Sega and Sony, who were like the big rivals at the time, had already released 3D gaming consoles, which was the new thing. And by then, Nintendo were a little bit behind. The other companies had brought out their consoles, and Nintendo landed 25 years ago today in Japan with a very important console.
And I was talking to someone this morning who remembers having one, and he says the game he most remembers was Goldeneye, and it was the game he associates with that console. What were the big games on it? Was that one of them?
Yeah, I mean, there's three main games, I would say, when you're talking about the Nintendo 64 that you really, really need to be thinking about. Goldeneye, definitely. The reason why that's so important is mostly because it brought first-person shooter games, which are very popular, especially at the moment. Things like Call of Duty and games along those lines, which are, many people that play games today will know. And Goldeneye was the first time that a first-person shooter had really worked on a games console. Before then, it had been the first-person shooters were always at home on a PC with a mouse and keyboard. So Nintendo cracked that with a great controller. Also, you've already mentioned one of the most important games ever, Super Mario 64, which was the game that launched with the console itself. And the reason why that's important is, again, going back to this idea of a 3D gaming, that was quite new at the time. Before then, companies had really struggled to make our characters controllable, if you like, on the actual screen. So the fact that Nintendo created this new controller called an analog stick enabled us to move Mario around in a 3D space, and it felt so natural. And the third game that we really should talk about is probably a game that is probably, I say probably in the most loosest term, the best game ever made, which is Zelda Ocarina of Time, which if you go back and look at the history of video games, many sort of journalists and fans and players will say that that's the best game they've ever played.
And so how did it do then as a console? Because there was console wars, as you say. There were other rivals around at the time. How did Nintendo 64 do when it was released?
It wasn't as popular as their two previous consoles. You already mentioned the NES or the Famicom in Japan and the Super Nintendo. Those were a little bit more popular in terms of sales. But the problem that Nintendo faced, even though the N64 was a great console and had a lot going for it, the biggest thing it had was going up against Sony, who had just released the first PlayStation, the PS1, as we now know it, just a year or so before. So and the Sony marketing machine kind of just blew all the competition out of the water.
And I'm well out of the game now when it comes to this. So where do we stand on what's the current dominant console? Because how did Nintendo get through? They didn't. Their next generation one didn't work at all, did it? The Nintendo one, but have they come back stronger since?
They have, and at the moment their current console is the Nintendo Switch, which is a marvelous device that you can not only play on your big telly, on your HD telly, but you can also just carry it around like a Game Boy. So it mixes the best things about Nintendo, which is that they're great handheld devices and the fact that you can still entertain you in home.
And what else is in the market? So are they dominant now, or is it still Xbox and PlayStation?
I'd say, well, it depends really. It depends what you're looking at. I mean, if you look at the demographic of like older gamers or more mature gamers, we could say, then definitely your Sony PlayStation and Microsoft Xbox is going to be something they're going to be looking more towards. But the Switch is still selling amazingly today, even though it's been out for 3 years, and it still flies out the shelves. So it's still hard to specify dominance, but definitely Nintendo are going strong. They haven't, maybe not as popular as the Sony or Microsoft, but they're definitely back in the game.
And just wondering, you're a retro collector. Is it fun to play these old consoles? Because presumably they look a bit clunky now by today's standards. Is it fun to play an N64?
Well, yes, they do look clunky if you're comparing them to what you're playing today. But there's a certain charm to it. There's a certain almost like innocence to it, where games were still, maturing as a concept and as a medium. And I still think there's a lot of fun to be had. And there's plenty. I've shown younger people games like my Sonic games behind that, like 30 years old, and they still get a lot of enjoyment out of them.
Yeah, Sonic. I remember Sonic the Hedgehog very well. Faith, great to speak to you, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That's Faith Johnson, gaming journalist, retro collector, has a website called Retro Faith. Would you ever play a console?